Senate Republicans would like to wrap up the confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court this week, and we're also finding out that the FBI investigation might wrap up as early as today. Joining me to discuss is Amber Athey and Kevin Daly. So guys, what do you make of this? What are you expecting? The FBI potentially going to wrap up this investigation. I can already predict that the Democrats aren't going to be happy no matter what, because they're going to say not enough people were investigated. Kevin, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I mean, this FBI report is basically geared towards 4 or 5 lawmakers who are still undecided about Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. I think the biggest question is whether or not this report will be made public. It's typical practice that a supplemental background check of this nature would be held confidential by the Senate. But this is such a high-profile issue that's inflamed so many passions nationally that there's a legitimate argument, I think, to be made that the report should be released or that the public should be read in on the contents of the report in some way.
Right, and that's sort of the Democratic talking point right now. Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker have both come out in support of making the report public, but notably, Senator Dianne Feinstein is not towing the party line on this. She actually agrees with Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley that it should be kept private.
Well, I personally would like to see what's in it, but, you know, of course, they'll have to decide. We know that either way, I think we're going to find out he said, she said, similar to what Joe Biden so famously said in 1991, that the FBI doesn't come up with conclusions. So I think we're going to end up exactly where we were to begin with. But we're finding out a lot more about the people that are making accusations against Judge Brett Kavanaugh, and that is we have all these ex-boyfriends coming out and other people that are familiar with them. So starting off, I mean, I found this one fascinating. So there was a letter sent to Grassley's office, and in this letter it was saying that Christine Ford maybe coached a friend on how to take a polygraph test. So I think, Amber, I'll let you comment on that.
Sure. Well, so this is problematic because, as we know, during her sworn testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee last Thursday, Christine Blasey Ford specifically said that she never gave advice or tips to anyone on how to take a polygraph exam. This ex-boyfriend says in a sworn statement that he witnessed her doing so with a friend and that she was able to do so because of her background in psychology. So this could really undermine something that she said under oath.
Now, the individual who she allegedly coached on how to take a polygraph, Monica McClain, has already released a statement via Dr. Ford's attorneys denying this allegation. But I had 2 different reactions to this letter. One, either Senate Republicans have had this letter perhaps for a little while and were withholding it until the 11th hour, sort of adopting the same tactics as the Democrats have used in the Kavanaugh confirmation, which I think is tactically savvy, or they're not quite sure what to make of this letter and we're releasing it at the last moment on the eve of the release of the FBI report to create some kind of misdirection and confusion. Whatever the Republicans are up to tactically, the release of this letter, I think, has been a smart move for them, but its contents need to be substantiated.
Yeah, and it was rather curious when Mitchell brought this up during the testimony, and she asked this question. I think we were all wondering why she was asking that question and what she had up her sleeve, so now we know. But if you look at this, somebody's lying after giving a sworn statement, so that is definitely problematic.
It's a he said, she said all the way down.
Totally,
Definitely.
He said, she said. And I just want to highlight the fact that Christine Blasey Ford is a research psychologist. I mean, she does this type of stuff for a living. And the words that she said was that she was afraid of taking the polygraph test really have stuck with me this whole time. Why would you be afraid to take a test if you're telling the truth?
Yeah, it doesn't really square with reality, and also just her background and research in this area would definitely give her some insight into how polygraph exams work, how easy it is actually to pass them. And going into some other things from this ex-boyfriend's letter, he also said that she never told him about a fear of flying and that they actually flew in a prop plane together, which of course is a very small contained plane. He also claims that she never had any problem being claustrophobic in small spaces or spaces that did not have a second exit. And additionally, that he was never told of any sexual assault. And of course, they dated for 6 years, pretty shortly after this alleged assault occurred.
Oh, he also mentioned that she cheated, committed fraud, and she had never mentioned sexual assault.
So the letter concludes by saying that Dr. Ford used a credit card that was in this individual's name without his consent. It seems I think she charged up something in the range of $600. It seems like that would be the sort of thing that is easily verifiable.
And Amber, you're pointing out that it seems like the establishment media are ignoring this little nugget of information on the polygraph test, yet they're just hyperventilating over the fact that Judge Brett Kavanaugh in college threw ice.
That's right. So I did a review of the media's coverage of this ex-boyfriend's letter, and so far CNN has not written anything on their website. They have not covered it on air. The extent of MSNBC's coverage has been a 1-minute reporter segment with Kristen Welker, where they basically use the angle that Republicans are pouncing on this letter. Meanwhile, you have NBC giving a full-on interview to Julie Swetnick, who has these completely unsubstantiated, unverified claims of gang rape, of 10 gang rape parties that she attended. Apparently, her story is worth reporting and is more credible than a sworn statement from the ex-boyfriend of Dr. Ford. It's really stunning.
Well, there's nothing to see here, Amber, right?
Well, as I recall, the NBC reporter after the fact noted that things she had said in the interview were inconsistent with things she had said in the sworn test in her sworn statement. So maybe NBC gets credit for that. But I think it is generally true that Michael Avenatti and Julie Swetnick have gotten to circulate in media pretty freely. I mean, Julie Swetnick got what I thought was a pretty easy interview on HBO's The Circus on Sunday evening, which is pretty unjustifiable from a reporter of John Heileman's stature.
Well, and she has all of these ex-boyfriends coming out of the woodwork too, questioning her credibility and basically saying she's not credible because of X, Y, and Z. We heard from a former weatherman, Dennis Ketterer, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right, but he was saying that he alleges and claims that she was into like group sex and all of these other things to the point that he didn't want to date her anymore because he was worried about her sexual history and her past. And so I'm sure we'll find out more about that. We also have another ex-boyfriend that went on Laura Ingram's show on Fox News who said that she threatened his life and the life of his unborn child.
And you know, we should also note that the Daily Caller News Foundation was first to report that Julie Swetnick had been sued by a former employer for lying about her credentials when applying for a job and falsely accusing her colleagues of sexual misconduct in what they alleged was a transparent ploy to direct from her own sexual misbehavior. So we have this employment history that the DCNF first reported on. You know, we have ex-boyfriends coming forward, I think in kind of an unfortunate way with some very tawdry details. And we have not a single witness, not a single witness over 10 parties who has come forward to confirm that they ever saw Julie Swetnick and Brett Kavanaugh in the same room or that these sorts of parties went on. So I think, and also I think the fact that Julie Swetnick sought out Michael Avenatti to represent her is itself highly dubious.
Well,
so I think this is not an allegation.
And the Judiciary Committee is pushing back, telling Avenatti to stop sending them stuff because there's really nothing to back up his claims, and they're just apparently saying it.
Her own interview on NBC was incredibly damaging because she couldn't say how she ended up meeting Kavanaugh, how she knew it was him. She said something about him having a distinctive face, which if you look at Brett Kavanaugh, he just kind of looks like any white guy. And then this ex-boyfriend also said that she loved to be the center of attention, and that could be her motivation for coming forward at this time.
Yeah, well, and also we had discussed that it was very odd that a college woman was hanging out with high school kids. That was totally out of her way to do. I mean, anything's possible. I don't want to say it didn't happen, but it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you talk to any woman and you ask them what their college years were like, were they going out of their way to hang out with guys that were, accused of gang raping women in high school? That really wasn't on anyone's itinerary.
I can say quite confidently, as a former teacher of high school seniors, that it would be not only very unusual for college students to move in those groups, but that school administrators and teachers would have been aware of such people and wary of such people.
And women certainly would not have returned to parties where they were aware of gang rapes happening.
Yeah, exactly. And as you pointed out, media not talking about the polygraph test, but everyone is hysterical over Trump's speech in Mississippi. I wouldn't call it mocking victims. I think that he brought up some very extremely valid points, which Ford's story, there's a lot of holes in it, and he's talking about how she doesn't remember where it was, when it happened, was it upstairs, was it downstairs, who pushed her in the room, was it Mark Judge, was it Kavanaugh, we don't know, but she does remember she had one beer.
You know that you want to go first, Amber.
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you. No, that's okay. I just think
we respect women at the Daily Caller.
That's right. So the mainstream media is painting this as a flip from the president. I don't think that's really accurate. Trump has basically been pretty consistent on this. He said from the beginning that he thinks that these allegations are wrongfully destroying Kavanaugh's life and his family, and he said that while he finds Ford compelling and perhaps credible, there's been no evidence to corroborate her claims. This was just a more forceful assertion of that very true fact, and it's not a flip. It's just a more forceful condemnation of what he sees as holes in Ford's story.
This definitely was not helpful for Brett Kavanaugh to the extent that moderate Republican lawmakers and moderate Democrats in voting for his confirmation could be cast by the press as associating themselves with President Trump's comments. So certainly I think in light of these remarks, a yes vote becomes more difficult for them. Also, I think the biggest threat to Judge Kavanaugh
But you think it was inappropriate for Trump to bring up all of these, or just you don't like that he was speaking about this?
I don't have a view on whether what Trump did was right or wrong. I'm just saying the fact he made these remarks, I think makes it a bit more difficult for certain lawmakers to vote yes.
Well, because Jeff Flake said he found them appalling.
Right,
well,
Susan Collins said the same.
Oh yeah.
Sure. But the other
He's
thing
lined
here,
himself up for a gig at CNN, so his term's almost up. So.
The other thing here is that the biggest threat, I think, to Judge Kavanaugh has always been that President Trump would not like being out of the news for this long and would sort of bludgeon his way into this story in an unhelpful way.
I wouldn't call it unhelpful, so I'll defend him on this. I listened to it. I didn't find it inappropriate. I didn't think it was out of place for him. President Trump consistently, it's very predictable what he's going to do at any sort of event, and he talks about what's going on in the news, and he gives his perspective and his views, and he wants to be heard since the media seem to twist a lot of the things that he's saying.
He's certainly channeling anger that a lot of people are feeling about this.
I don't think it's going to make a difference. And of course, I take sexual assault allegations extremely seriously. I wouldn't want, I think victims have a right to be heard and believed, but again, due process needs to, play its course here, and Judge Brett Kavanaugh deserves to be heard as well in this investigation to go through. And just based off of everything that I've seen is I think that these women have a lot of credibility issues, and if there was really hard evidence to back up their claims, I would 100% support them. I still support the investigation to go through. I want to see what they find. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows I'm not trashing the victims here.
Yeah, definitely. And
the alleged victims.
and look, I want to bring up this Quinnipiac poll that came out because you mentioned that Trump is channeling a lot of anger on behalf of his base and on behalf of Republicans. The Quinnipiac just did a poll on the midterm elections, and it's the tightest margin between Democrats and Republicans that they've seen since July. It's hard to say that at least some of that is not due to the fact that Republicans are really riled up about what they see as a smear job against a very qualified judge.
Yeah, I think in the end this is going to backfire on Democrats because I think the average voter, they're going to say, you know what, I believe in due process and I wouldn't want this to happen to anyone in my family. I have a brother, I have a husband, anyone in my family. I think that they deserve a chance to go through this, the right way. And what's going on here is just this attack, and it's just totally out of line, and I don't agree with that.
There also is not a single Democratic strategist this side of Jerusalem who wants an open Supreme Court seat on the day of the November election.
Absolutely.
That just is not the case.
25% of Republicans said they voted for Donald Trump because of Supreme Court picks.
Right.
So we have some questions here. I'm going to look through it. We have somebody that says confirm Kavanaugh, so more comments and questions.
Are they voting today?
So I don't think they're voting today. The FBI investigation might wrap up today.
Right, and then we could see cloture Thursday, Friday, and a final confirmation vote maybe on Saturday. But things are really in flux on that point right now.
So somebody here makes a comment, Dusty Dillard. He says, there's absolutely no way to know who's telling the truth. I'm a true conservative, but I would like to know the truth. And let's see, anything else you see interesting here, Amber? Oh, they want to know about the GoFundMe page. I remember reading something about it.
For whom?
For Christine Blasey Ford, there's a GoFundMe page, and I think that
there's 3.
There was question about whether that was legal or not for her to be accepting money at this point directly to her name.
I don't know why it would be unlawful, and certainly that is useful in terms of financing her security and what I imagine are her mounting legal costs and things of that nature. What actually is problematic is the GoFundMe pages that have arisen for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. It would be quite inappropriate for a sitting federal judge to accept I think last time I looked it was up to $500,000. It would be quite inappropriate for him to accept that payment.
He lost his part-time professor gig, didn't he?
At Harvard.
He did, yeah.
A bunch of Harvard students, I guess, complained to the administration that it would be a Title IX violation for him to be on campus because it would be considered sexual harassment. So that's where our colleges are at today, folks.
And that was a lucrative position. As I recall from his financial disclosures, it was in the low tens of thousands of dollars. So that is that's a blow.
Yeah, definitely.
Somebody wants to know if Dr. Ford has a boyfriend now. I don't know about that. Did you guys hear?
Married,
She's
right?
married with 2 sons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh yeah, her husband.
With 2 sons.
Yeah.
I did know that.
Right, because
he
her husband was in the
testified that
therapist.
she had mentioned the name Kavanaugh back in 2012, which Rachel Mitchell says, well, that's when his name was being thrown around during the Romney time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that could have been potentially why, because he was on the short list for a Supreme Court nominee.
That's correct.
Right,
yeah,
and she
correct.
claims that the reason this alleged assault came up at that time in the therapist session was because her and her husband had previously had an argument about whether or not to add a second exit door during their home remodel, which she claims was due to claustrophobia and the PTSD from the attack. Some renovation records have suggested that it's more likely that the door was actually used as a separate business or renter's entrance.
That was constructed, I read a report to this effect on Real Clear Investigations yesterday that was constructed as early as 2008.
Yes.
I don't know how probative that is, but an interesting fact.
And then this is the last question. Kevin, you might know this better than me. Who's the FBI actually interviewed?
So they've interviewed Mark Judge, Leland Kaiser, who is Dr. Ford's best friend. They've interviewed Patrick Smith, who was also present at the party. They've interviewed Chris Garrett, who was a person who I believe dated Dr. Ford and who kept company with Judge Kavanaugh. That's a non-exhaustive list, but those are some of the individuals that
if they don't release their findings from the investigation, we won't know anything about what they said?
That's the kind of detail, the witness list is the kind of detail that's probably going to leak. Whether or not we learn what they actually said is going to be up to the White House.
Amber, I'll let you have final thoughts.
All right, well, so I heard some speculation this morning that the fact that nothing is leaked yet probably suggests that it's good for Kavanaugh.
I think that's probably right.
I think you're right. Okay. Thanks for watching.